And so Sarah submitted this talk, and I thought it was great as a follow-up to Chris, because we keep hearing more and more about the nonlinear career paths. And she had a really great idea and background on this, and so I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for her career path talk.
Okay, cool. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, good. Okay, so for a start, totally feeling pressure because I don't have alcohol or fluffy toys to give out, but I do have stickers, and I have clippy stickers. So that usually goes down well with everybody, so we'll go with that. But I want to say thank you for coming to my talk. I really appreciate it. It's really cool to be in Vegas. I've never been to Hacker Summer Camp before, so this is my first time. Yeah, and this is my talk about talking about nonlinear career paths into InfoSec. I'm basically mostly going to tell you a little bit about me and how I came into InfoSec, because I wanted to share the story of how that happened, because mine is slightly non-standard, and I hope it will encourage other people who've done the same to share theirs. Really quickly, who am I? I am an Azure Advanced Security Architecture Global Black Belt. That is genuinely my job title. You can think of that as what you will. Obviously it means I can tell people I fight hackers, which is kind of cool. I'm solid blue teamer. I really don't fight anybody, but yep, I work for a small startup called Microsoft. You may have heard of them, I don't know. And I'm based in Australia. I'm based in Melbourne, which is down here, if you don't know where it is. So there's a quick geography lesson. I like to see if I've come the furthest when I come to conferences. I'm not sure I have. I'm sure someone's come further than me, but Melbourne's quite a long way away. And I also need to apologize because my flight got cancelled and delayed by like 12 hours, and so I came in very late last night, so I'm kind of dying a bit, so don't mind me. Another really quick note of caution, I have a very common first name and a very common last name. You'll see Sarah Young, the Christian author. This was her, I found her book when I was in Hawaii last year. I didn't buy it because it was $30 and I'm cheap, but, and not religious. No offense intended to anybody who is, but I'm not, so it probably isn't worth it. The other thing I can't put up on a slide, if you Google my name, is there's also Sarah Young, the late 80s porn star. It's true, I'm not joking, so do Google that with caution. Or Bing, I've got to say Bing, right? Please Bing with caution. I work for Microsoft. And really quickly, I always cover this off when I'm in North America, just because it's something I seem to get asked a lot, which is, this can kill you, this Australian animal can kill you, this funnel web spider can kill you, this jellyfish can kill you, this crocodile will kill you, this really ripped kangaroo will also kill you, and I don't know, cockatoos drink beer apparently. A lot of people ask me about living in Australia, and yes, it's true, everything in Australia is trying to kill you, so yeah, if you'd like to talk to me about that afterwards, please do. The reality is, if you live in one of the big cities, you never see any of these things, but there you go. So, moving on to actually what I'm going to talk about today. I've probably wasted a good 4 or 5 minutes of my talk. I didn't have a standard start in IT. I don't have any tertiary qualifications in IT, but I've been working in IT and InfoSec for the past 10 years or so. So I want to do a couple of things with this talk, which was tell you my story about what I did and how I ended up in IT, and then also give you an insight into some research I've been doing about diversity in general. Now, I'll say right from the word go, my research is not scientific in any way, shape, or form. It would not stand up to scientific methodology. It's based on me talking to people I know and colleagues and my experiences in the various different workplaces that I've worked in. So don't ever come and talk to me about how scientific it is, because it's definitely not. But it is a snapshot, and I think we work in such a big industry, and there's so many different people and backgrounds that it's always good to get these different snapshots. So yeah, that's what we're going to look at. And I also wanted to look at, is there a standard path into information security? Lots of people come in from lots of different places, and how do these diverse candidates that we have influence the workforce? And then on the other side of things, there's also the side of hiring managers. I don't know, is anybody here a hiring manager or has hired people? Sweet. These, and you'll probably well know, in fact, I've definitely had a discussion about it with people already in here, that it's really, really difficult to hire diversely, even if you try. There are challenges around that as well. So I just wanted to talk about that. I'm just one lady who's done a bit of research, so don't hold me to it. It's just a snapshot. Your experience may be different, and if it is, that's awesome. You should talk about it as well. Get up on stage and talk about it. Anyway, so I love the fact that now I work for Microsoft, I get to use the cute little bit raccoon drawings. I'm actually not a dev advocate, and I'm officially not allowed to use them, but whatever. Okay, this I only decided to put in my slide like 15 minutes ago, but this is me when I was 10. It really is me. It's such an awful picture. My mum was supposed to send me a nicer picture, and she didn't, so I had to get the one I had on my phone. But this is me when I was younger. I'm about 10 in this picture. I was big into video games. I was big into computers. I managed to fix a printer jam when I was 7. Very proud of myself. And my dad taught me to change config sys and autoexec bat in MS-DOS so I could change the processor interrupts on a game so I could actually get the sound card to work. Didn't really understand what I was doing, but I was copying him and I was smart. Oh, I thought I was smart. What I used to do when it became obvious I was quite interested in video games, when the internet was in its infancy, I used to download some totally legitimate copies of Pokemon games onto an emulator, and I learned hexadecimal from hacking from altering the codes and using the built-in Game Shark. That's how I learned hexadecimal. As we know, hexadecimal goes to 256. At that time, we were on the 2nd generation of Pokemon, so we could go to 251. So all the variables were just in one line of code. And that's really cool that I actually know that. And I can tell you for a fact, if you look at Pokemon Gold, Silver, or Crystal, that all the Pokemon are filled up, unsurprisingly, till slot 251, and then the next ones are empty and full of glitches. That's cool, I know. But that's kind of how I started messing around with hacking things and changing things, etc. When I went to high school or secondary school in the UK, here's a picture of me. I literally couldn't find one again. So that's me with a vending machine, which is terrible, I know. I used to fill up the vending machine. It was my job when I was in the last 2 years of school. So that's why that picture exists. When I was at school, I actually didn't do IT. I was supposed to do IT, but I fell out with my IT teacher because we were learning how to write websites. And we were writing HTML, really, really good HTML, very basic. But I wrote a website that said, "We hate my neighbor." We were doing it as a joke. We both wrote the same website. My IT teacher got to me, saw it, dragged me out of the room, and told me that was the terrible thing about the internet, and that she was going to kick me out of IT if I ever did something as terrible again. By the time we got back into the room, my friend, who had twigged on to what was going on, had changed hers to the "We Love Sarah" website. Cow. So I didn't do IT. I didn't do IT for a couple of years at school purely because I fell out with my IT teacher, and she threatened to kick me out. But I didn't want to commit to it at a degree level. So I did go to university. Here's me graduating when I was 21. And I don't know if you can read that on the screen, but I actually graduated with a history degree, because that was the obvious choice for someone who was very technical. The reason I did history, my logic for doing history was that I didn't have to commit to anything, and it was general, and it was solid academic, and it would be great, and I wasn't really committing, which was my main thing. However, it did become apparent in the first year of my degree that I really, really couldn't stand history, and I really didn't like my course mates. We didn't have a lot in common, and I basically spent most of my time messing around on the internet. I mean, that's not different to any student ever, I know, but I spent a lot of time messing around with IT stuff anyway. I was going to quit my degree and start again, but in the UK at this time, they just changed the rules. And I know this is very different to other places in the world, but it used to be in the UK that you would pay £1,000 a year for tuition fees. Bargain. And they changed it the first year I was in university to £3,000 a year, and if I'd have quit and started again, I would have had to pay £3,000 a year, and I didn't want to, so I just finished my history degree. Yeah, so that's why I ended up with one. I wasn't failing it, and, I mean, my dad always said that if I'd actually turned up to any lessons, I probably would have done better, and he's probably right, but there you go. then next I did a gap year. So this is me in New Zealand. I went and worked in a school. A gap year, I know in North America is not so common, but if you're not familiar with the concept, essentially, you take a year off either before you go to university or afterwards and go and work or do something or just travel, and it's really fun. Again, I'm basically not committing to doing anything. I actually signed up to do a law degree as well, a law course when I got back so I could be a lawyer, because I thought, I've done history, law sounds good. But when I was in New Zealand, because I realized we're getting to a why did you end up in IT, Sarah? I actually ended up doing a lot of IT work, an awful lot of IT work for this school. And when I came back from New Zealand, I really missed it, wanted to go back, and the only way I could go back was to get skills, so I was told, because my visa had run out. And I was told that if I did law, because law is very specific to each country, I wouldn't be able to move with it. So I decided I would go back to IT. And that's literally the reason I ended up back in IT. Because we can see here, how the heck did you end up in IT, Sarah? Because so far, I've done nothing technical. I didn't do an internship. I want to stress as well, by the way, I'm not saying this is like a recommended path, but I haven't done an internship. I have no tertiary qualifications. I haven't done any work experience. I did work experience in a cake shop. I really like cake. Genuinely, I told them I was interested in hospitality, but really I just wanted to eat free cake for 2 weeks. And I did, it was great. As you can see, I've been very career focused my entire life. But I decided that I really wanted to go back to New Zealand, and to go back to New Zealand, I needed to get a job in IT. So I got my first IT job. I worked on the service desk. I actually found a picture of me and my team from like a long time ago now. That's me and my team on the service desk. All I did was pick up the phone. I didn't know what I was doing. I remember a lady rung up and was like, I need you to help me with my MPLS phone. And I was like, what? I have no idea what that is. And also now I actually know more about that. I'm like, what the fuck is an MPLS phone? It was VoIP, but I've never heard anyone legit refer to it as an MPLS phone, so there you go. Anyway, I worked at this local IT company around the corner from my parents' house. We did managed DSLs, managed backups, and hosted things in the data center, which is where I learned to do hands and eyes, my Cisco CCNA. I did ITIL, good old ITIL Foundation version 3, and something called an SDA certificate, which is Service Desk Analyst Certificate. I have no idea what it is. It's probably expired now, but that's where I started off. And I talked to a lot of people who say, even graduates, I mean, I was a graduate, remember, will say, I need to do something more than an IT job. I shouldn't be on service desk, I should be doing more than that. But hey, that was where I started, and I really don't think there's any shame in starting on service desk. You learn so much stuff from working there, and you also learn how incident response works, etc. I'd worked there for a couple of years, and then I got a place on the Accenture graduate scheme in London, which I was very lucky. And I'll point out to everybody here, so pretty much every company I've worked for, I have been rejected from at some point in the past. Accenture rejected me, Ernst & Young rejected me, yeah, pretty much every company I've worked for. Well, maybe 60%. Microsoft have rejected me before for a job, so the other thing I really want to stress is that if you get rejected at some point, it doesn't mean you will be rejected in the future. So do remember that. It's really, really important. Anyway, so I work for Accenture in London. This is me at our training in Chicago. This was the first time I'd ever been abroad for work, and I'm like 22, 23 there, and I was super excited because I thought this was very glam. Nowadays I travel for work literally all the time and have realized it's significantly less glamorous, but at the time I was very excited. Yeah, when I worked for Accenture, I used to do a lot of infrastructure transformation. I got flown all around Europe. It was very, very hard work and really difficult, but I did learn a lot. It was great. And that's when I got a lot more technical. And finally, I had enough skills to go back to New Zealand after about 3 years of doing that. So I went back to New Zealand. I got a job with Ernst & Young. They told me that I would be doing exactly the same things in New Zealand. But no, that was not true. When I got to New Zealand, they were like, hey, we don't actually do what we said that you will do, and we don't really do that infrastructure stuff, but you're technical, right? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, go work with security. And that's how I got into security. completely by accident, very lucky, because I realized, in fact, security was then this was 2014, so it was really, really picking up. It was starting to just go on the upward curve in terms of awareness, etc. And yeah, that's how I ended up in InfoSec. And then I worked for a bank, I worked for an AWS partner, hello AWS, and now I work for Microsoft. I probably shouldn't, hi Microsoft, even though you're not in the room, I should probably like wave at my current employer as well. Yeah, so that is how I got into IT and how I got into security. It's not, I don't want to, I realize, I want to say I overcame so much adversity. It isn't really true. I kind of stumbled around and was a little bit lucky. I did work really hard, particularly when I was doing the service desk job, because I had a massive gap in my knowledge. So I did a lot of technical certifications in my own time. So I realized like me kind of gliding through it at this makes it a little bit more glamorous. I mean, I did spend my life, I had my own lab. I had my own lab in my bedroom doing my CCNA and stuff. So, you know, I don't want to make it sound super easy because it's not. And as we all know, that this is a continually learning thing. To remain relevant in IT. I mean, now I do cloud and Azure. You know, the stuff I did 10 years ago is almost completely irrelevant now. It's good for a background knowledge, but one of the things that really strikes me about being in this industry is just how much we have to keep evolving. And in a way, that's really, really great because it means you're continually learning, etc. But particularly for people who are trying to enter the industry, like the stuff that we know now, that we're dealing with now, in a few years will probably be obsolete. So it's always, if you can ride the right wave at the right time, it's a really good way to get in to the industry, in my opinion anyway. Again, one woman's opinion, it's all good. So that's my story. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about some other paths into InfoSec. Now I see this as this kind of four main routes in, which is tertiary training in information security, computer science or something similar in some kind of tertiary. I always say tertiary rather than university because I know there's a lot of different university things. There's a lot of different other things that aren't necessarily university or college out there. So I'm trying to kind of encompass all of them because I don't discriminate, I don't mind. A lot of us, of course, traditionally would transition from another part of IT, which is what I did. And then there's on-the-job training like apprenticeships. I think these are still really the main routes into information security. They're not exclusive, but I think the proportions of where people are coming from have changed. Again, you may have seen different to me. I think this tertiary training in information security is very, very new. I mean, universities and higher education institutions have only really started offering them in maybe the last 3 or 4 years. Definitely in my part of the world, definitely only the last couple of years. We're just seeing InfoSec graduates coming now, so like 3 or 4 years down the line from those original courses. Of course, computer science, that's been around a long time, and so I still think a lot of people come in from there. People are still transitioning from another part of IT, and that on-the-job training, the apprenticeships, that's, again, quite new, but I think this trend towards apprenticeships has been coming from really a lot of kind of a backlash from that everybody needs to go to university. And I don't think it's an IT-specific thing, but I think apprenticeships are really, really useful, and they do lend themselves to certain careers. And I think IT is one of them, so it's definitely something we should be looking at. But is there a standard path then? Well, based on, again, my entirely non-scientific research, I would say maybe. I think in general, the older you are, the longer you've been, I don't want to say the older you are, I mean the longer you've been in industry, the more experience you have. I've just realized what I've written on the slide, oh my God. The less likely you are to have formal training in InfoSec. And that's just because it's only become really a specific focal point very recently in terms of training. We know now, if we remove the tertiary things, we've also got things like Security A+, CCNA Cyber Ops. There's loads of brand new security qualifications popping up, loads of them. And that's only really recent. I think, and as I said, it's only become very formalized in the last few years. And I reckon that, again, based on the people I've talked to, the things I've looked at, I reckon about 50% of people in InfoSec have a comp sci degree. That seems to be my completely non-scientific research, so take it for what you will. But then let's look at the who and the what of diversity. So who in here considers themselves to have had a non-linear path into InfoSec? Pretty much everyone. This is why it's so difficult to try and standardize this. That's great. Loads of people do. I think we don't really truly have that kind of linear standard way in. And that's good because it means we get lots of diverse people. There are so many real-life stories. I can't talk about any of them in detail just because of time, but these are some people I personally know, like a lady came from business continuity planning, which is kind of a decent segue in, a lady who was a nurse and retrained, and there's also accountants. Now, accountants, I always think are the funniest ones to go into InfoSec. Now, largely they go into GRC, but I know an accountant who went in as a pen tester, which is very different. Yeah, I know, I've got surprised faces there. So there's all kinds of things you can do. I just wanted to put up an accountant picture because it amuses me because I work for a Big Four. These are just a few of them. Like I said, don't have time to go into them in a load of detail, but I'm sure, but they're all great people. I know them personally. They're great people. They're great InfoSec people. And they got into InfoSec because someone gave them a chance. They'd done their own things. They'd done things online and in the community, but essentially still they needed someone to give them a chance to get their first foot in the door. And they're great people. So we need to do more of this. But it's hard. And looking at the influences of these people, again, I could go into this forever, but generally people's managers and teams would say that engagement's higher. This is stuff you probably already know. Diverse teams make for diverse opinions, and that's a good thing. And it's a bit of a domino effect as well, as in, when you start having more diverse teams, those teams become more attractive, and then you get even more diversity. I'll just say as a quick note, when I talk about diversity, I often talk about gender diversity, just because that's my personal experience of that in IT. I realize that diversity has many facets, and so when I'm trying to be inclusive, but I might keep saying gender, so apologies, but that's just my personal experience. I mean, talking about my personal experience, having more ladies in teams that I was working in is definitely a really good way to encourage more people to come in, because it takes a particular character of person to be the only woman or gender fluid or whatever person in a team. And not everyone's got that personality. And that means that you might miss out on some really great people, because that shouldn't be a deciding factor on whether you take people in. I'm not saying I've got an answer for how to deal with this. I'm just kind of talking about it because I just think we need to talk about it as much as we can so we actually start to formalize some of this thinking. On the other side of things, though, it's not always positive. I've had bad experiences. I'm sure plenty of people in here have as well. Like, the journey to diversity is not easy or straightforward. You can still have, even if you start introducing ladies, there's, like I said, I'm going to say ladies, but again, we're just talking about my experience. If you become the token female, that can make you not feel good as well. Like, no one wants to be the token diversity hire. So it's a really difficult thing to manage, and you can also end up with cliques. I mean, I had to put Mean Girls up there because, you know. Yeah, I know, it's totally appropriate. And again, so it's not just a case of, oh, look, we've hired someone for diversity, now we have to leave it. This is a constantly evolving thing. You need to be working on it. Managers need to be working on it. And it's very slow, and you might take 2 steps back at some point. I know even if you hire, like, say, a couple of women, if you've got kind of a strong, for want of a better word, bro-dude culture, that's not just going to be got rid of by hiring a couple of ladies. So it's a bigger, so we don't, and I think that sometimes there's a danger, particularly maybe in larger organizations, that we're just doing a tick box. Oh, look, we've hired a lady, we've hired someone from some other kind of background. It's not good. But to give them their due, looking at the hiring manager's perspective, like, where do you start to create more diverse teams? How do you start? It's difficult, and hiring processes, traditional hiring processes particularly in big organizations, lend themselves to accessing people through more traditional pathways, which aren't necessarily where you'll get these diverse candidates from, and these non-linear candidates who've come from other places. And then, as I said before, you've got this danger of this token hire perspective. So what do you do to access the right candidates? What do you do when they don't apply? I think sometimes positive discrimination isn't always effective. There's a couple of organizations I've worked for where they weren't, you had to shortlist at least one female for a job. And if you're a manager and no female applies for the job, how can you do that? And also, I knew, again, in a previous role, I know a manager had to shortlist a lady purely to tick the box that he shortlisted a lady who didn't actually have the skills required. And, that's not fair. It's a waste of time for both the organization and the actual individual. So again, I'm not saying I have answers to this, because in some ways positive discrimination is a good thing, but there are downsides to it. So I'm more just encouraging you to think about it. And job descriptions still discriminate against non-linear candidates. So we know, I spent like an hour trying to find some of these examples, which clearly I couldn't find when I was writing these slides. But we know that you can have things like junior InfoSec analyst, requires 10 years worth of experience. I mean, come on. So really think hard about your job descriptions and how you write them. I know that often, if you're a hiring manager, you're either getting a standard template or you're just doing a brain dump of everything you want. And we know that particularly ladies, there's loads of research around women will only apply for jobs if they've got 90 to 95% of the qualifications, and dudes will do it at about 30. But I think there's two things. We need to encourage people coming from different backgrounds to be more confident, but also I think we need to be more mindful when we're writing these job descriptions, because we're kind of excluding people without even realizing it sometimes. I think I'm nearly done for time. So again, my conclusions, just a couple of things. Celebrate your non-linear path to InfoSec. If you didn't come in a standard way, which basically none of us did, make sure that you celebrate that. There's no shame. I have no computer degree. Everyone laughs when I tell them that, but I really don't. There isn't a standard path, I don't think. I think it will become more standardized, but, and of course, there's the obvious places to look. Look at universities, look at colleges, but don't discount maybe trying to find some other people, and it might take more effort to find them. Hopefully that's going to change as we kind of progress this diversity thinking, but I don't think we're there yet. And diversity and breadth of experience makes teams more engaged. I haven't got to talk about this nearly as much as I wanted to, but hey. And don't forget that hiring in a diverse manner is hard and can take time. It really can. Like this diversity thing is not going to fix itself really, really quickly. It's a journey for everybody, and I don't think anybody's got it right yet, so I think we're kind of all muddling through it together. It's a bit like DevOps. Same thing, no one really understands how to do it properly yet, I don't think. So don't beat yourself up, keep going with it. I really encourage that, particularly if you're a manager who's had a load of diversity targets just thrown on them by upper management, because I think that's kind of I think it's a difficult thing. That's me done. Did I click? Yes, I did. I put up a couple of things. Microsoft is big on diversity in tech. It's not a plug for Microsoft. There's plenty of other things out there, but I put a couple of links up. I have a ton of stickers and leaflets. Feel free to come and get them. And thank you ever so much for listening to me. I've never done this talk before, and I'm horrifically jet lagged. So I really appreciate you listening, and thank you very much.
I'm one of those older workers that you referred to. For the rest of the crowd, I'm one of those older workers that you referred to. I took my gap year after about 30 years in IT. So now, when I saw the title nonlinear, that seemed to fit kind of where I'm at. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on people who are looking for not necessarily 100% full-time career positions. It seems like your talk was more about the getting into the InfoSec space from different starting points, but for someone who has been in IT for a while, has gone out, now is looking for something to some way to contribute still.
That's a good question. I think there's a lot more focus, at least in larger organizations, but actually I think even smaller ones, in like flexible working and part-time stuff. I guess it would depend precisely on what you were looking for. Like I know a lot of companies are big on, at least down in Australia and New Zealand, they're really big on job shares and stuff. So if it's a job, because we know that there are some jobs that don't really lend themselves to being part-time. I would say actually security possibly is one of them, depending on precisely the role. And a lot of companies are big on doing job shares now. One of the companies I used to work for, their head of security awareness, so a pretty senior role, is now a job share as well. So two ladies do it part-time. Yeah, they both do it part-time, but it's the same role. So there's stuff like that. I think there's also if it's a small, I say that big companies have more flexibility with that, but I also know that if you look at more boutique firms as well, they would probably actually, if you could connect with them, they'd probably be able to have a discussion and see if there was something you could do. Again, I'm very much focused on down my side of the world. I know kind of the States here is a little bit different, but and the way employment laws are super different over here. Like, you guys only get 2 weeks holiday, oh my God. Paid leave, crazy. But I think there's such a shortage of workers that if you're qualified and you know what you're doing and you've got something to offer, I think as long as you present that in the right way, there's definitely like a discussion you can have with people. But again, that probably comes down to like more networking and stuff as well, to like get yourself in front of the right people.
I would